What's up everyone, Tech Mindset here. Today's video is a follow-up to my Alienware QD-OLED AW3423DW review. At the time I made that video, I didn't have a latest generation console to test with, so I could only point to other videos I saw that had those consoles to test with, and the results seemed to be hit or miss. In early September 2022, Sony rolled out a system update which brought 1440p 120Hz support. Seeing as how this monitor is the best screen I own right now, the very first thing I wanted to do when I finished setting up the PS5 was to try out some games. However, note that VRR, variable refresh rate, is not supported on the PS5 at the 1440p resolution. Since my plans of using an optical audio switcher were foiled, the PS5 does not have an optical out port. I had to come up with an alternative because my soundbar's HDMI doesn't support 4K HDR, so the PS5 would have catered to the weakest link in that chain. Luckily, however, my soundbar does have an aux input, so I was able to use the audio out port on the monitor and connect it to the soundbar. In addition, the nice thing about the DualShock 4 and the DualSense controllers is that you can plug in 3.5mm cables into them. So when I want to play PS4 or watch something on the PS4, I plug a small Bluetooth speaker into the headphone out on the controller. All I have to do is keep the batteries charged up on the controller and the speaker and I'm good to go. Same thing with the DualSense controller. I just plug in my Sennheiser headphones and I'm good to go at night. With the audio taken care of, it's time to fire up the PS5 and see how it looks on this monitor. First and foremost, it doesn't support the ultra-wide resolution. As much as I'm crossing my fingers for ultra-wide support in the future, until then there will be huge black bars on the left and right sides of the screen. I will want to make the switch to a different monitor or TV at some point because I'm concerned with this being an OLED panel. The more time I spend with the PS5, the pixels will wear out unevenly. So far, I tend to keep a good balance between playing PC and PS5 games, but other than that, this setup works well for now. To prove that it's working, I'm going to show you the screen and video settings and the video output information screen. As you can see, the resolution is 2560 by 1440, and even though it says 60 Hz here, I'll run the test so you can see the PS5 tested 60 Hz and 120 Hz with HDR enabled, and it passed. In the test 1440p output screen, it will test the resolution, Hertz, and HDR. If you're familiar with changing the resolution on a computer, this is a similar process. The screen will go blank and a timer will start. If the setting worked, you'll see an image and you can select yes. If you don't see the image, the counter will count down and reset. As you can see after running the test, the PS5 says my monitor supports 1440p for 60 Hz SDR and HDR, as well as 120 Hz SDR and HDR. I pointed it out in the original video that streaming apps on the PC don't support high resolution in HDR, so with the PS5, I'm finally able to see what a movie looks like in HDR on this monitor. This is also a great time to come back and revisit the quirks of this monitor with Windows 11. You only saw a glimpse of this monitor flickering in my prior video, so I'm going to give a better example of that here and see how all the monitors flicker a bunch of times. It's not limited to HDR either. Say if I turn off a monitor and turn it back on, this happens all the time, multiple times a day as I use my screens, especially because I try to mitigate OLED burn-in, so I'm constantly turning my monitors off when I'm away. That reminds me that I'm also still very annoyed with Windows 11 because of the small line that gets left behind when the taskbar is hidden. I would hate for that to be burned onto my screen, though it is at the bottom and it's very thin, so hopefully it wouldn't be that noticeable. Then there's the very annoying taskbar behavior with Windows 11. I never daily drove hiding the taskbar until I had this monitor, and I have to say it really sucks. It's way too easy to accidentally bring it up when I'm working when my mouse barely touches the bottom of the screen, which stops my momentum dead in its tracks for a few seconds until it slides out of the way. And it's really frustrating since before, I could lock my computer and just leave my old LCD panel on all day for hours at a time and not even have to worry. I pretty much have to resort to turning this monitor off every time I intend to step away at my desk. In addition to the taskbar issues, also throw in any pop-up notification from antivirus, anti-malware, or any other notifications that love to nag you. Instead of being a tolerable nuisance before, it takes on a whole new level when you're worried about burn-in. Back to the PS5 and this monitor, playing a movie on HDR and toggling HDR on and off shows an immediate difference. I noticed that when the HDR was off, the image actually seemed like it had more saturation and was glowing more orange compared to when HDR was on. In this next shot, however, I think it's a beautiful representation of HDR. It has the bright candle in the center, and then the light illuminates parts of their faces, while the other sides of their faces fade off into shadow and black. This really shined, and I'm happy to see that the phone camera was able to capture this. Without HDR, the shot doesn't look bad, but the shadow isn't fully black and instead looks gray, and everything in the frame is still visible even if it's just a dim gray. When HDR is on, the inky blacks really shine, and the shadow fades off into nothing. I'll try to set up some scenes for comparison to see if I can get them to show on video using consistent camera settings and switching between HDR on and off. First, I'll start with some HDR videos on YouTube. Next up is Spider-Man Miles Morales. Next is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Next is God of War Ragnarok. Next is Horizon Zero Dawn. Next is Uncharted 4. And finally, The Last of Us Part 2. In conclusion, I'm excited that I finally have a PS5 in-house, and I can play even more titles with HDR. I'm still very impressed with this monitor and the image quality. The quirks I mentioned in my last video are still there, however. The flickering screen and issues with the taskbar notifications have caused the most pain though. For that reason, if I want to keep using QD-OLED panels to play console games, I'd prefer to just pick up a similar 16:9 panel to avoid seeing the black bars. Until consoles have widespread ultra-wide support, to me it's only a bonus that the PS5 supports 1440p HDR and 120Hz. Ultimately, I agree with the sentiment that you should not purchase this monitor if you're only going to be playing console games. When it comes to PC gaming, however, it's still a sight to behold. I have Uncharted 4, God of War 2018, and Horizon Zero Dawn on my PC, and I prefer to play them on PC instead of playing them on the console because of this curved ultra-wide panel. A final note since my last video, if you use an AMD GPU or didn't want to pay the early adopter tax, Dell actually released a new version of this monitor called the Alienware AW3423DW without the G-Sync module, and it's $1,099.99 at the time of this video. From what I've seen about it, there were some additional pros and cons on the new panel, so be sure to do your research before you pick up either version. That's all for this one. If you have ideas for future videos, be sure to leave a comment below. If you like what you saw, like and subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell to be notified of future videos. Thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.